New developments in the U.S. that are likely to affect travelers from some African countries. The U.S. State Department says it will stop issuing certain visas to citizens from Eritrea, Guinea, Sierra Leone and Cambodia. The new restrictions are aimed at countries that have refused to take back citizens who've been deported. Well, under federal law, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson can't stop all or specific types of visas from being issued to these nations. President Donald Trump has stepped up efforts to crack down on immigrants who are in the United States illegally. Well, for more on this now, let's go to CGTN's Daniel Reintjes. He's standing by for us in Washington. Daniel, we do understand now that since this new travel ban was mentioned, we understand that Sierra Leone has now since agreed to take back its citizens who've been deported from the U.S. What more can you tell us about this?
Right, so the reason that the US did this was because these countries, in their view, were not cooperating in taking back citizens that they prioritized, namely those who'd committed or were involved in violent crime or drugs trafficking. So in order to provide some incentive for movement on that issue, they issued a statement or a letter to the State Department saying that these were non-compliant countries. And then it was up to US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to decide which in a menu of different non-immigrant visas he would apply a suspension on. And in the case of Sierra Leone, only yesterday, Tuesday, we had the news that customs officials and members of the Foreign Ministry of Sierra Leone, when it came to business visas and non-immigrant visas, would be targeted. And then today we've had a radio statement from the Foreign Ministry spokesman talking locally, saying that they've agreed to accept 20 individuals from that country who were involved or alleged to have been involved in violent or drug-related offensive. So it looks as though the actions by US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson focus the minds of officials at the Foreign Ministry and the Immigration Ministry in Sierra Leone, and that's why we've seen some movement today.
And indeed, Daniel, it really is just a further indication of how seriously the Trump administration is going to crack down on illegal immigrants and refugees that are being accepted into the United States.
Yeah, the illegal immigrant issue is a massive one here in the United States. And even under the Obama administration, there was a priority on violent or criminal offenders being deported and less of a priority on those who didn't break any laws to be subject to deportation, even if they were there without documents. But on the refugee side, this is a very highly political issue for the White House. Donald Trump campaigned on these issues, really appealing to his white working class base. And now we see reports from the New York Times suggesting that one of the White House insiders, who's an immigration hardliner, wants to further reduce the cap on the number of refugees that the United States will bring in. So for some context, President Obama in 2016, he allowed 110,000 refugees to come into the country. Donald Trump then reduced that down to 50,000. And by October the 1st, we now expect that number to be further reduced below 50,000. One of the hardliners even wanted just 15,000 refugees to be admitted per year into the United States. The internal debate carries on here, but it certainly feeds into this perception that the US is abandoning some of its original sort of, what would you call sort of moral leadership in the world when it comes to taking refugees. But insiders in the White House who advocate this hardline position say it doesn't make financial sense to bring people into the country. It's best to treat them in the region in which they are and to provide them with sustenance and support in those regions. And on top of that, they also argue that it brings in extra security problems in terms of vetting the potential for militants to come into the country. So it's a very highly charged issue here. And I expect that the New York Times reporting is fairly accurate, and we may even see a further reduction in the number of refugees who are allowed to be admitted each year into the United States. Back to you.
Daniel Reinters, thanks very much joining us there from Washington, D.C.